Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Melanie Tidman completed a doctorate in health science, contributing to her 45 plus years in healthcare delivery. During her career, Dr. Tidman owned and operated an outpatient pediatric neurological rehabilitation center, gained expertise in neurosurgery intensive care and rehabilitation, has published several studies and articles about health and longevity, and is a contributing chapter author for an occupational therapy textbook. She is the author of 3 books, including her third book, Families and Parkinson's Disease, A Survival Guide, which is pending publication in 2025 and is based on her 7 years of research and 45 years of clinical experience in working with patients and families living with Parkinson's disease. She is a certified metabolic health practitioner with the Society of Metabolic Health, the SMHP, I always get that wrong, and the new SMHP Research Academy Chair. Dr. Tidman and her team conduct clinical studies on the application of the low carbohydrate and ketogenic diet to symptoms of Parkinson's disease and the influences of various metabolic health conditions, including the publication of 5 studies starting in 2019. Dr. Melanie Tidman, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you so much, Casey. It's so nice to finally meet you and talk about one of my favorite things, which is
Uh,
my research.
I cannot wait to chat with you. I lament the fact that you and I have attended the same conferences and we actually haven't even gotten to meet in person yet. It's so funny. You get in these big conferences with so many different people and get caught up doing different things and haven't actually got to meet you in person, but I'm very much looking forward to hopefully sometime very soon.
Oh, isn't it the truth? Yes, I find myself running back and forth during those things. And I just think it's a wonderful opportunity to network, and everyone is so welcoming and friendly and passionate. And, what is not to like?
It's so amazing. It's kind of a yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword where I go to a conference center and I meet so many wonderful people and they're all so passionate and fired up about this. And I just feel so optimistic. Like we're getting all these case studies and case series and we're making progress. And then I inevitably go to the airport to fly home and I realize, yeah, we still have a lot of work to do. We need to get this message out there. So it's kind of a double-edged sword again of like feeling like we are making a lot of progress, but we still have a long ways to go.
Isn't that the truth? And I feel like that is a positive thing. It's almost a shot in the arm to keep going and to keep expanding. And I have all these because I attended San Diego last year. Now I have now all of these new avenues that I'm conducting research in. So it's just so stimulating.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about the San Diego conference is the day one, whenever they focus on a specific topic. And this last year was all about mental health. And what an epic, epic day. That was absolutely incredible. One of my favorite conference moments for sure.
It really was. And, Doug and Pam do such a great job putting that all together. Kudos to them. And of course, being a researcher and a professor and having that emphasis, I was really excited about the launch of the new Research Academy that was kind of a brainchild of mine. I like to say that it took 9 months to create that academy from scratch. It was like having a baby. And so the baby is born and the academy is up and running. So all of the mental health research that they talked about, just all of the research presentations, just really were so exciting and give us so many areas that we can conduct research in.
Totally. That's such a good point. Even just some of the stuff coming out this year about anorexia and low carbohydrate diets is just absolutely earth shattering to me. I find that wonderful. I've heard you on both Life's Best Medicine and also the Low Carb MD podcast hosted by Brian Lenskis, one of our mutual friends. I've been on both of those shows. He's been on our show as well with his wife, Linnell. And they have each show, I think most of the listeners will be familiar with, have a different flavor. So on the Low Carb MD podcast, it's a little bit more about the science and the research. And on Life's Best Medicine, Brian gets to, explore people's personal stories, talk about their spiritual influences and things like that a little bit more. I loved listening to you on both of those. And I'm wondering if we could hear your own personal story through this, because you have a very specific and strong reason why you are here and why you are doing this research, and not exactly becoming a millionaire doing all this work that you're doing. Can you please share with us your own personal story into this?
I would be happy to. It's why I feel like I was left on the planet. So, I'd always been very health conscious. Being an occupational therapist for 45 years, I was into lifestyle and exercise and taught my patients lifestyle and exercise techniques from a rehabilitation standpoint. And so I was eating vegetarian, I was working out 3, 4 times a week, and I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And by the time I reached 2013, I had some pretty significant neurological symptoms. I was on 5 medications, had 5 medical conditions. And no one, I went to 7 specialists. No one could figure out why I was having these episodes where I lose consciousness, passed out on the floor. I had all these kind of really bad things happening. And so I ended up at Mayo Clinic. And, I also have to disclose that I'm a believer. And so I really feel like I was led to go to Mayo Clinic. And at Mayo Clinic, they found a brain tumor. And someone there said, you might want to think about your diet. Um, I came home. I decided to not receive any treatment for the tumor. And I was led to listen to the first low carb, I believe it was the first one, low carb summit in South Africa. That was about early 2014, I believe. And it was like the scales fell off my eyes. I heard things I had never read about, a whole body of research that's been out there, not that new. Epilepsy research is 100 years old. Why did I not know anything? So, being who I am, and feeling very led, I threw out everything I ever knew about nutrition and cold turkey, went on a very strict ketogenic diet. I dropped my carbs down to almost zero. And I'm telling you, the transformation in my mind was a miracle because I was having these episodes of losing consciousness that got very regular. And after, just a few months on this approach, that was all gone. And I began weaning off of all the medications. And within a year, I was back to working out heavy. I was eating ketogenic diet. The tumor was gone. I was on no medications. So, and some of these things were like things they told me could never go away. For example, obstructive sleep apnea. My mother had it, my father had it, my brother has it. And so I had a severe case. And when I went back for my return sleep study, the doctor came in the middle of the night, which never happens. Sleep studies, you just kind of are in the hands of the techs. And she came in, I thought, oh no, I'm dying. Something's really wrong. And she came in and said, you are one of my severe patients. You don't have it anymore. You're cured. How did you do this? So, to me, that is powerful. I also feel like at that time, I really said, God, if you'll leave me on the planet, I promise I will work with people to help with their health. I won't charge them. I want to help. I want to serve. And just shortly after that, I really feel like this was another big open door for me, which is not a coincidence. A person that I knew was a neighbor, lived behind my mother. And I didn't live where my mother lives. And so this person would step in and help with my mother when I couldn't get there fast enough. And she and her husband and her sister were on the board of the Colorado Parkinson Foundation, and we were talking one day, and I just told her my journey, how, oh my stars, everything is better. I'm on no meds. I'm powerlifting. I've lost all this weight. I've cured all these conditions. And she said, well, all of us are falling apart and, we need help. And so I said, okay, let me teach you on the board who are open to it, about this approach. So I taught them about the ketogenic diet and they go on the diet. A lot of them are getting better, curing conditions, getting rid of medications, and they're so excited that the board of CPF got together and said, we want you to do research in Parkinson's disease using the ketogenic diet, and here, how much money do you need? And from 2018 to the present, I cannot say enough about this fabulous group of people. They serve 600 members all over the nation, actually, because they Zoom a lot of their meetings. They're doing support groups, and they are helping me write my next book. And that's at the publisher right now, the Families and Parkinson's book. So simultaneously, a student of mine in one of my doctoral programs was a fabulous student, phenomenal student. And she and her husband became very interested in being a part of my research team, Dr. Dawn White, Dr. Tim White, and they have been a part of my team since 2019. And we have published 5 studies and they have helped write this book, and they are just phenomenal people. So again, all of these things just fell into place. And then, of course, I could go on and on forever. I'll let you talk in a minute. I love the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. What a group. Again, just really spoke to what I wanted to do with my life. And so I have a telehealth practice that I work with patients, and I love it. They're just phenomenal people. And I'm also conducting studies in osteoporosis right now. So many things.
That's it. That's the only thing you're doing. Just those 80 million things.
Well, I didn't mention all my teaching, and I'm writing courses for my universities. And then I volunteer in my community. I am a volunteer aerobic dance instructor for seniors, and I'm a volunteer powerlifting instructor for seniors. And I'm often the youngest one in my classes. I've got women in their 80s powerlifting and dancing
Amazing.
for a solid hour. I love that too. It's just
Uh,
fabulous to see them doing so well.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of the wonderful things that you are out there accomplishing. It's just so wonderful. And I really appreciate your personal story. And you mentioned, being a believer. And I think for the listener, regardless of whether they call themselves believers or not, can acknowledge that your story is very inspiring and can also acknowledge that you definitely have been led to the right people at the right time. All we hear from so many people out there is how much resistance there is and how boards of directors of lots of nonprofits would not be open to addressing any of that. I think most people could acknowledge how inspiring and how led you have been in your story. I do want to go back to the Mayo Clinic. When they told you that you should address your diet, did they tell you specifically what diet you should be looking at? Did they mention anything about low carbohydrate or ketogenic diets, or did they just say you should look at diet?
They just said you should look at diet. And of course, one of the things that I've always done is research. And so I figured, well, I've been on mostly a vegetarian diet all these years. How's that working for you? Well, it wasn't working great. And I mean, when we go out to eat, I got a salad. My family just shakes their head at how I go 110% down any road. And so my idea was to look at nutrition research. And and wow, there was so much nutrition research, but then those presentations at that Cape Town low carb symposium were just incredible in terms of their research evidence. And of course, all of those presenters posted their references, and there were thousands of them. And yes, I found those studies, read a lot of those studies. I think my initial collection of nutrition studies was about 1,200 studies that I read. And it was just such an eye-opening experience. So I think when Mayo said, look at diet, and I came home and said, well, I've been doing this. And so I'm going to swing over here and look at this research. And it was like the answer
Wow.
to not only my medical conditions, but the answer to my new mission,
Wow.
my new calling, which was to help people learn this approach and
Wow.
improve their health. Um, I have a patient I just started working with a month ago. Her diabetes is already in remission. I mean, who gets to do that?
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Wow, that's so cool. I just think you were vegetarian for a
Right,
reason, and it was for health. I think it
right.
would be so much easier to say, "Oh, I need to look at diet. Well, maybe I should go harder into vegetarianism or veganism." And you're right. The studies are there. It's an astounding amount of research that has been done within the last 100 years and beyond. All of this stuff
Exactly.
has been looked at, and if you want to search for it, you can find it. But it's not typically the first things that come up on like a Google search. And so I
Right.
do find it really interesting that you were again somehow led to this information and realized that you were doing a vegetarian diet for health reasons, but it wasn't providing you the health that you were looking for, and you completely switched the other direction.
I really did. And of course, it also spoke to my background in neurology. I knew that the brain needed certain fuels that it does better with. I also was a pediatric therapist for a number of years, working with babies and young children. And you know what? Babies are in ketosis as long as they're breastfed. They need vast amounts of brain injury and energy for neurological development. So all of these pieces started fitting together for me. And I thought, okay, if ketones can help babies and protect their brains, what could they do for people with neurological conditions, brain tumors? You know, it it just was one of those conversion experiences that Gary Taubes calls it, one of those aha moments that I could not deny. That, yes, I think God led me to just investigate this whole area. And it certainly had benefits for me. And since 2014, when I really started investigating this, I have seen patient after patient after patient with rather miraculous improvements. Of course, everybody's improvements are different, they're at a different rate. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure. Yeah, that's very well said. And it's one of those things, like you said, that you can't unsee it once you see so many of these stories piling up and this fixing a seemingly almost endless amount of different things. You're right. It's going to be individual with everybody, but
Right.
the list of things you can improve on this diet is absolutely incredible. And I don't want to just fly by this, but you decided that even though you had a tumor, you were not going to do anything with it. What is the status of that today?
Oh, it was gone within a year of starting this whole thing.
Wow.
And the symptoms were gone probably in the first month.
Wow. That's amazing.
Right. And I mean, I was pre-diabetic. I had a severe case of fibromyalgia. I'd had it for years. So even when I would exercise, it would practically lay me low. There were very few things that I could do. I couldn't lift weights because if I tried to lift weights, literally I would be in bed. my fibromyalgia was so bad. And
Wow.
of course, now I power lift. I'm kind of an old lady, but I power lift about 80 pounds.
That's
Uh,
great.
Working towards 100. That's my goal this year.
Wow, good for
And
you.
yeah, it's phenomenal. And I just feel like if we can use diet, and I'm talking about a continuum in terms of therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. I'm way up here at this end. I'm, less than 5% of my daily intake from carbohydrates. Now some of my patients are more like, you know, 30 grams or 50 grams. They do okay. They do fine on that. So it's very individualized. I also love that about this approach. I can customize it. I even have patients that, for religious reasons, do not eat many animal products. They eat dairy and eggs. And so for them, yes, I can create a ketogenic approach. They get into nutritional ketosis. It's a little harder to push that protein. So when they do the dairy, I do have them add some dairy-based or some egg-based proteins to their diet. So the beauty is I can customize it to meet needs, and
Yeah.
that's what metabolic health is about.
Wow. Oh, I love that. I'm actually a little bit glad we don't live in the same place and work out at the same gym, because if you came in lifting 80 pounds, it's way more than I can lift, probably. You just make me look bad in front of everybody in the gym. That's wonderful. Wait, how did your interest in Parkinson's kind of evolve over time? Is the thing that you wanted to focus on? And if you don't mind, would you explain exactly what Parkinson's is? I think if somebody asked me today, I would obviously be able to identify some symptoms, but probably not be able to go much past that. So, could you tell us how your interest involved and what it actually is?
Absolutely. So, as an occupational therapist, I had worked with patients with neurological conditions across the lifespan. So, I would have infants in my rehab program that had neurological conditions, clear up to 90-year-olds with Parkinson's disease. So, the whole gamut. And what I found was there were very few treatments that really helped people with Parkinson's. Yeah, the synthetic dopamines that they take do help the motor symptoms somewhat, but there's so many other things involved in Parkinson's other than the motor. Now, that's the first thing you see. I'm glad you asked this because there was a time 20 years ago when you probably didn't know anybody with Parkinson's, and you didn't know anybody who knew anybody with Parkinson's. Well, that is not the case anymore. Currently, it's estimated that there are 1 million people in the US living with Parkinson's disease, which is supposed to increase to 1.2 million by 2030. That's just 5 years from now.
Goodness.
Worldwide, there are approximately 10 million people living with the disease, and that each year there are 90,000 new cases of Parkinson's disease that are diagnosed. Um, Men are 1.5 times more likely to be diagnosed with Parkinson's than women, and the direct costs and indirect cost totals in the US each year related to Parkinson's is about 52 billion with a B dollars.
Wow.
So it really has increased since the last 10 years, and I have ideas about why that is. So when the board at the Colorado Parkinson Foundation contacted me to do this fully funded research, again, it was one of those open doors that was perfect in timing. I knew that this is what I wanted to do in metabolic health, but to be able to help people with Parkinson's, wow, because it's something that, it's an area I had worked in for many, many years. Now, I like to use Dr. Matt Phillips in New Zealand, his iceberg analogy when you're describing Parkinson's, because there are two tremor diagnoses that you can have. One is familial tremor, which is not Parkinson's. It's a familial genetic related tremor that you see people have. The other is Parkinson's. Parkinson's is now the #1 movement disorder in the world.
Wow.
And it is characterized, according to Dr. Phillips' analogy, by the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is tremor or a little difficulty with the smoothness of your gait. Those are the first two things that you notice. The bulk of the iceberg, the part that's beneath the surface that people don't see, are things like metabolic health disorders, diabetes, and irritable bowel and colitis and Crohn's disease, and even celiac and gluten intolerance, and some of these things that feed inflammation. There is an entire body of research emerging since 2022 that I have so been binging on. It's my new exciting area, which is the area of the gut microbiome and the fact that research is pointing to the possibility that Parkinson's begins in the gut through the creation of an abnormal protein that travels through the vagus nerve to the central nervous system and causes these tau proteins and neurofibrillary tangles that we see in Parkinson's. Fascinating. And I feel very beginner in my awareness of some of this research. But the fact that we can trace Parkinson's potentially to the origin in the gut says we might be able to arrest this condition years before somebody gets their first Parkinson's symptom by healing the gut, addressing the gut microbiome. So a whole area. And of course, I can't wait to finish the studies I'm doing right now because I want to start this study next, is really looking at the use of certain strains of probiotic. Almost 100% of people with Parkinson's, a big percentage, have chronic constipation, chronic gut issues. And so if we can address their gut microbiome, bring down some of these abnormal proteins, bring down total body inflammation, we have an opportunity to affect their symptoms. Another thing that I'm doing in my current study that I'm recruiting for is I'm continuing to test the effects of beta hydroxybutyrate, blood ketones, on brain function and some of the symptoms. Other symptoms of Parkinson's in this big bulk of the iceberg analogy are things like sleep dysregulation, REM sleep disorder, which is a terrible disorder where people in their sleep, deep asleep, punch and kick and end up running around the house and destroying and they're fast asleep. I mean, it's just a terrible disorder. Anxiety, depression. I have 2 studies published on the effects of ketogenics on anxiety and depression in Parkinson's. So these are bulk of the iceberg that you don't see. Apathy, lack of motivation, fear of social situations. These are things that you don't necessarily connect to Parkinson's, but they're very much a part of it. And then to finish Dr. Phillips' wonderful analogy, he's such an inspiration to me. He took it deeper. So the very foundation of that iceberg is metabolic damage through mitochondrial damage. So even looking at the cellular level, that's the building blocks of every system, every function in your body. If we can affect that through ketones, blood ketones, beta hydroxybutyrate, reducing inflammation, So we're going to address the entire sequela of symptoms. If we only address the tip, which is what the meds do, we're ignoring an entire group of symptoms that truly affect the quality of life of these patients.
Wow. That was so well explained. I really appreciate that. His chat and those slides were absolutely striking. That was one of my favorite talks all weekend that he gave, and showing those different icebergs. If I can find it, if it's publicly available, I will tag that in the show notes so the person listening or watching can go and look that up. That's absolutely wonderful, and I love your explanations. I can't wait to talk to you about the studies that you're doing. But in your opinion, is the benefit of a ketogenic diet the removal of things like processed foods and sugar and seed oils, or is it also to do with the increase in ketones?
I think it's both. And I think you can't really have one without the other. So, yes, it's a given that decreasing your intake of processed foods and seed oils and sugars is is going to affect your health. But it's a combination. As you decrease those things in your diet and you focus on healthy fats and proteins, you give your body, you get your body to change, convert its fuel sources. Sometimes this takes a while. Some people get into that nutritional ketosis state very rapidly. Some people take a while to do that. But I feel like it's both, it's a balance of both. And what I first do when I'm first starting with a patient is I say, number one, anything in a box or a package, out it goes. We're going to do whole food. We're going to do real food. We're going to do food the way God created it in its most natural form. Number two, I want you to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. You never need to go in the middle aisles, maybe to grab your coconut oil, okay. But you go on the perimeter of the store, the produce section, and then the dairy section, and then the meat section, and then out the door you go. So they begin to really sweep out of their kitchens everything that is not on my Dr. Westman's page 4 list. He is also someone I accredit my healing to. What an incredible person he is, kind, compassionate, and such an amazing researcher for many years. Anyway, number 3, I have them start doing some form of exercise. And of course, you say the word exercise to a lot of people, they're like, I am not going to a gym. Well, you don't have to. So I have them start walking. How far can you walk? And in one of the case studies that I shared in San Diego, I had a gentleman who was bedridden when he started my study. And so walking was really a major goal for him. But I have them start, if all you can do is walk to your kitchen and back, let's do that 3 times a day. We build slowly. I credit my occupational therapy background because we are really the masters at breaking it down to the smallest part that you can do. And let's build from there. We call it grading activity. So, and then number 4, I have them start testing. Another company that I have worked with who are phenomenal people and an incredible company committed to research is Keto Mojo. They have been supporting the research that I've been doing for many years, and their meters are top notch. And so I have my patients start testing in the morning. How you going to know how your body's responding? Yeah, symptoms is one way. But another way I can help you adapt and adjust your nutrition is, what is your blood showing me every morning on my portal? So they sync their meters with my provider portal. Those numbers upload and I email all of my patients every morning. So
Amazing.
that gives me that connection and they get really excited about their progress. So that's another major pillar that I teach my patients early on.
Wow, that's incredible. Those steps, of course, would lead to better health, and I absolutely love that. The meters to me for the run of the mill person doing a keto diet may or may not need it, but when you start to get into metabolic psychiatry and using it as a tool, it becomes very, very important. And I notice with most people, it's almost like a continuous glucose monitor that it's very self-motivating. People understand the numbers, they learn, they try to get the numbers better, and that leads them to change their diet. One of the things that you mentioned is related to some of the studies you've done, which is coconut oil.
Yeah.
This reminds me a lot of the story of Dr. Mary Newport and her husband with Alzheimer's, and how they didn't even necessarily start by changing his diet. They just started by adding in coconut oil for a specific reason. Can you explain what that is and what you noticed when you were studying that?
Yes, so that's the study I'm doing right now. So there are two ways that I am testing the elevation of blood ketones. One is the daily amount of MCT or coconut oil. They can choose which one, and I do that for a reason. MCT oil is odorless, tasteless, but it's also a little more expensive. Some of my patients can barely afford the meat that they're buying for this diet. So I tell them you can go and buy cold pressed, minimally processed coconut oil and try that. That has a coconut flavor. Some people don't mind that. I haven't found a huge difference in the ketone levels using either of those.
Interesting.
So I'm trying to give people a natural approach they can drive to the grocery store and get for themselves. I don't use exogenous ketones for that reason. My philosophy is I want it easy, accessible, and as cheap as possible for people. And so the current study that I'm still in recruitment for is going to test three different approaches. It's a crossover trial. I'm so excited. These are harder to do, but they're very exciting because a crossover trial compares you to you through three different interventions in my case. So your first 8 weeks, Casey, if I enrolled you in my study, you'd be eating your junky old whatever. Of course, I know you don't eat a junky old whatever, but I take people where they are, whatever they're eating, and for 8 weeks, they just keep doing that. They don't make any changes. And then I do biomarker testing at the beginning, and I do biomarker testing and survey testing at the end. I do the surveys at the beginning too. So the surveys are things we use in Parkinson's disease. There's a sleep scale, there's a cognition scale, and there's a fatigue scale. And fatigue is horrible in Parkinson's, bless their hearts. They're fighting the apathy in their brain, but they're also fighting this huge mountain of fatigue. So 8 weeks, phase one, you just do your junky old whatever, and I do your testing before and after. And what that does is it tells you, Casey, how's your body loving what you're doing? And I love for people to see that. Some people start that phase and they never knew they were diabetic, and they have A1Cs of 15
Oh my goodness.
and nobody's ever told them. And I'm like, oh, okay, we got some things to look at. And so then there's a washout period because that's how you do crossover trials. It's like 4 weeks. Phase two, the only thing I have you do is add the MCT oil each day. And Dr. Bruce Five has done some research and published a book on a protocol using 3 to 5 tablespoons of MCT or coconut oil per day. Not changing your diet necessarily. And he has found some good effects. The 3 to 5 tablespoons, about 3 tablespoons, is the area that Dr. Stephen Cunnane is researching in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and finding some good benefits. So my research stands on their research. That's why I love it. Dr. Matt Phillips' research, Dr. Cunane's research, Dom D'Agostino's research on ketones. So I have the privilege of standing on their shoulders and continuing the research effort. So then phase 2, that's all you're doing. So you're building up slowly on your MCT oil, eating your junky old diet. And I haven't done any dietary intervention but that. And then they test every morning. So I'm watching glucose and ketones every morning and charting that. Then at the end of phase 2, just from making that one change, what do your symptom surveys look like? What do your biomarkers look like? And then there's a 4-week washout. The final phase, as you would guess, is a full-blown ketogenic diet, 70% fats, 20% proteins, 10% carbs. And this is very common. Dr. Phillips' RCT and Parkinson's used these same macronutrient ratios. So again, I base a lot of my research on what's gone before. And then you're still adding the coconut oil. And I'm still having you test your blood in the mornings, and I'm still charting those results. And at the end of 8 weeks of phase 3, I run your labs again. And so what that's going to enable me to do is to take the same group, instead of comparing you with a 70-year-old man who lives in, Timbuktu, I'm comparing you with you in each of these different phases. In essence, you are your own control group. That's what the beauty of a crossover trial. So I'm still recruiting through May of 2025, and I hope to publish this in 26. It will be very exciting because I don't believe, I could be wrong, somebody call me on it if I'm wrong, but I don't believe I've ever seen a crossover trial with this design in Parkinson's. I think it's the first one.
Wow, I've never heard of one done like that. That is absolutely amazing. Can you comment on any preliminary data that you have seen, or is it a little bit too early for me to ask that question?
I can say it's preliminary, and it certainly is. I've only had 4 completed, so you have to take these results with a grain of salt. But 4 who completed the 36 weeks took excellent data for me. And what I'm seeing are the following. Of course, glucose drops like a stone. Those who started the study who were in the diabetic range ended the study not in the diabetic range. Ketones get into the nutritional ketosis level above 0.5, well into phase 2, and they maintain that for phase.
Into phase 2. So just adding
Yes,
coconut oil can get somebody into ketosis, assuming they're continuing to eat a mixed diet.
right, exactly.
Wow. Wow.
That's how
That's
powerful
cool.
this is, especially when you get up into the 4 and 5 tablespoon per day range. So, and there are people out there, researchers out there who say, well, you can't do this on a mixed diet just by adding coconut oil. Well, that's not what I'm finding. Anyway, their sleep scores are improving, their fatigue level improved, their level of cognition wasn't quite that big a problem when they started, because cognitive changes aren't a given in Parkinson's. They can occur in the later stages. Some people have cognitive changes early on in the disease. Everybody's very individual. So haven't seen a lot of change in cognition, but what they do say is my mobility is better. Well, that's not something that I was necessarily asking them to track, but on their symptom scales, especially the UPDRS, which is a Parkinson's specific scale, their mobility improves, their gait improves. So those are just very preliminary in the results that I'm getting with the 4 who've completed the study. I have 14 total in the study right now, and I'm hoping to get 20. If I can get 20, I'd be thrilled. So we could have a little bit more powerful statistical analysis for the
Incredible.
study.
That's incredible. That is so powerful. I love that. And then after finishing phase two and then the
Uh,
washout period, do people at that point do people like stop doing the coconut oil, or do they notice so many benefits that they continue? And when they transition over into phase three, is it much easier for them then as they're noticing some of these benefits already? They must be super motivated to be compliant on the diet. Is that what you're noticing?
Absolutely. In fact, in phase two, suddenly I see their glucose numbers coming down. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing with your diet? Because theoretically, their glucose numbers shouldn't move. They're eating what they normally eat. Well, what they're telling me is, I don't want that nighttime bowl of ice cream anymore. I'm not so much into the donuts. So it's almost like their body is self-regulating, which is phenomenal. And then I think it's a real powerful effect of nutritional ketosis. But some of these people aren't even quite at that level yet. They're in the point 0.3 range, but they're beginning to notice their cravings are kind of going away. So when they get to phase three, they're ready for phase three. They're like, oh, I'm not even tempted by that stuff anymore. Another comment I want to make is during the washout period between phases 2 and 3, they are supposed to stop the coconut oil. But they have told me, I don't want to stop the coconut
Right.
oil. One of them, who's already completed, said, you're not going to believe this, but in phase 2, my tremors went away. I didn't have tremors. And when I stopped the coconut oil in the washout period, they came back. So that's pretty powerful when you think about the fact that tremors are so debilitating. Who wants to go out to eat when you can't keep the food on your utensil?
Right.
So they really are loath to stop the coconut oil in the washout. They're supposed to because a washout truly is a washout. But what they have said is by the time they got to phase 3, it was kind of a no-brainer to them. They didn't really it was like their body began, and this happened with me. You begin to crave the fats and the proteins and really not the carbs. Still, all these years later, and that was 2013, and this is, 25. I don't really eat hardly any carbs. The carb intake is very, what I call, incidental in the dairy that I eat, but it's amazing how your tastes change, your cravings change. I'm now eating sardines. Have I ever in my life liked sardine? Like, never. But now my brain's like, "Give me DHA, give me EPA," so it's amazing how everything changes.
Wow, that is amazing. Somebody offered me a piece of fruit last year and I tasted it and I was like, wow, that is really sweet. And they were like, are you kidding me? Like, that is super tart. I'm like, all I taste is sweetness. It's amazing how your taste buds change and how powerful that is. That is incredible. And I would feel the same way about the washout period, excuse me. Like, of course you need that for the study, but
Right.
it's borderline like almost unethical to have somebody stop it if it's really fixing them. I think is amazing. And we're talking
Yeah.
about the numbers and all the things that you're measuring and the numbers of people in the study. But I think we also need to talk about some of the case studies that you've done. And you can pick any one or two of the ones that really stand out. But these are the just I've heard you talk about these, and to hear a life change the way that it has is so incredibly powerful. And remembering that we're talking about people who have lives and families and all these things is just it really sinks home the point of how important this stuff is. And so again, if you'd like to choose like one or two that really stand out, we would love to hear it.
I'll choose 2. One is profoundly miraculous that I did not publish, and one I did publish. And I want to say that these are real people. These are real people, real families. My passion for families is the motivation for the book that I've just written with my team and helping them in their most desperate hours. So Through the foundation, a mother called me. She had a 32-year-old son in end-stage Parkinson's. So your listeners need to remember that it used to be that you got Parkinson's later in life. That's not the case anymore. I'm having 30-year-olds, 25-year-olds that are just diagnosed. Can you imagine having young children as a young father, usually in these cases, although there are females too, who now has a neurodegenerative disease. Anyway,
Crazy.
so this mother contacted me through the foundation. Her son was in stage Parkinson's. The doctors had put him on hospice care. So end stage, end of life, take him home and let him die. And this mother was a mama bear. She was going to figure out what she could do to help her son who could no longer swallow. Swallowing is a real severe symptom in Parkinson's, especially as the disease progresses. He could not speak. He could not sit up. He could not, he was, the mother said he's fading away. And so I told her, I said, I don't want to give you any false hope. I don't have any idea if this will help or not. But the first thing you need to do is to find a doctor to put in a feeding tube. He couldn't swallow. We couldn't get into him the nutrition, hydration, and yes, medications that he needed. And so it took her a while because they don't put feeding tubes in end-stage hospice patients. She found someone who would put in a PEG and a PEG percutaneous epigastric feeding tube. And into the tube, I had her put a high quality ketogenic formula. That's main ingredient was good proteins, but also MCT oil. And give him good hydration and get his medication levels up. He couldn't swallow them. And really, probably a combination of the three, but of course, I give the credit to the MCT oil. This young man woke up, began to talk, could then swallow, could start eating, could start asking for things, could start working on his computer within just a few weeks of the protocol. Now, that is, you wouldn't even expect that nutrition could be that powerful, and it is. So, one of the first roadblocks I hit with people with this whole idea is food is not that powerful. You cannot wake somebody up from the jaws of death using this approach. And I've seen it. Now, does it work for everyone? No, it doesn't work for everyone. But for people who really have nothing to lose, which is where I was in 2013, I didn't think I was going to live to see 2014. So I thought, I'm doing it. And this mother really was astounded at the improvements in her son, who was really on death's door when she came to me. Now, no less miraculous is the case study that I published in 2024 through the Journal of Metabolic Health. What a journal. I love the journal. Is about a gentleman who was 53, stage 4, severe symptoms, could only walk 10 feet with his walker bent at 45 degrees. He was in bed most of the day. He had roaring pain, and a lot of my people with Parkinson's have so much pain. It's almost like the brain is hypersensitized in the pain areas. He had a 8 of 10, 9 of 10. He was on all of these pain meds, depression meds, anxiety meds, blood pressure meds. He was morbidly obese, well over 300 pounds. He really couldn't do anything. He had been a chef in his background. And so when he signed up for my 24-week study, I said, I don't know how you're going to do this because you're basically in bed, but here's what you need to do. And of course, being a chef, raising a kitchen garden, doing recipe adaptations, he knew how to adapt the diet right away. And he removed almost all the carbohydrate except for what he got in some green vegetables. And within a month, he's up walking around his house and into his backyard within 12 weeks. And when he was also diabetic and his insulin was in the 50s, it's supposed to be below, I like for it to be below 2. His was in the, I mean, severely insulin resistant. I mean, you name it, he had it. He was one of our metabolic syndrome patients that also had Parkinson's. Anyway, within 12 weeks, he's lost 60 pounds and his biomarkers are all normal.
Wow.
And he's walking and started walking around his neighborhood. And then by the end of 24 weeks, he's working out at a gym and taking long walks. I mean, this to me is another miracle story that actually, this kind of story I see all the time. So, yeah, it's a miracle, and I don't want to minimize his effort, but I see these kinds of results all the time. So his pain meds, he was able to reduce to just one med. His pain levels were more like 2 and 3 out of 10 each day rather than 8 and 9. He reduced his blood pressure meds. Actually, I think he got off of those. He reduced his anxiety and depression meds. He just kind of had a new lease on life. So that study is published. I have another case study that was published of a woman who was a PhD candidate trying to finish her PhD, and her metabolic syndrome and her symptoms were so bad that after 24 weeks, she was able to get back to school, and her exercise was better, and her life, her daily life skills were so much improved.
Oh
So
my goodness.
yes,
Those are striking and very powerful and so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know this has been an absolute flyby of your work today. We've just barely scratched the surface, and I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I would
thank
love to invite you back on, maybe when the book comes out or when the study is released, so that we can go a little bit deeper into your work. I love the kind of idea of your books of being a survival guide.
Yes,
I think that's a wonderful way to approach, and definitely made me think about things that I'd never thought of before. So I really appreciate that you kind of wrote those books, and I would love to have you back on so we could go a little bit deeper into your latest book, especially. But this
I
work
would
is,
love to do that.
I just, your passion is incredible. I just think back to that moment, call it a bottom moment where
Right,
you made a deal with God to,
right.
come back and dedicate your life and look at all the change you made and the people that you've met and the connections you made and the lives you've changed. It's just so absolutely inspiring. I have enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. Dr. Tidman, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
So the Colorado Parkinson Foundation website, it's co-parkinson, not no S there, .org. And at the top, you click on study. And then what you will see is all of my research presentations that I have given and the current study recruitment video that talks about the study and all of the elements of the study and how you can sign up. If people are interested in participating in this study, they can email me at study at co-parkinson.org. And those emails come directly to me, and I respond to every email within about 2 hours. So, the beauty of being a part of this study also is you get access to my metabolic classroom where you go in and have videos to watch and handouts and education. And then you meet with me every 8 weeks, and we really work on diet and lifestyle. And I love all of that. I really think of my research participants and my patients as family. and how would I want my family members to be treated. And I try to treat them the same with the love and the service that I feel like I was left on the planet to give.
That is so wonderful. You are definitely making a difference and holding up your end of that bargain. So I'm just
Thank
so
you.
inspired by you. Thank you so very much for all of your amazing work and for changing so many lives. And thank you for taking time to be on our show today. We really, really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Casey. It's awesome to get to talk to you. I just feel like I've known you for years. That's the thing about people in this space. We
I
just feel
know,
like we've connected and we've known each other for
totally. We
years.
feel like old friends for sure,
Right.
reconnecting.
And
Yeah.
thank you for the work you're doing. So important and reaching out to people and educating them on health and you keep that up.
Well, I can't stop. It's just like you. When you see this, you can't unsee it, and the passion is just yeah. It's hard to want to stop. So we'll keep putting out podcast episodes and chatting with amazing and inspiring people like yourself. And yeah, we'll definitely keep it up, and I know you will as well.
Thank you so much again. God bless.
Thank you so much. God bless you too. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.